Hey, good morning, everybody. How are you? Happy Wednesday. You want to talk about GameStop? I do too, but I want to talk about one thing real quickly. A shout out to SoFi and the trade idea we put out there on Monday. We observed that flow on Thursday of the $13 calls for May 16th appearing. SoFi made a nice move yesterday and a nice move in the extended hours session. And at time of filming, we're a little ahead of the market opening, up about 6.7%. So trading over $12. So all of these calls are actually going to be up even more than they were. I'd put this out there for the few the people that are subscribed to my X. I'd said a lot of noise surrounding SoFi with some recent option flow last week. I entered the $13 calls from May 2nd at $17. Those went up to 28. They were up 64% yesterday. Traders betting on upside and or some volatility as they loaded the $13 calls for May 16th. And then I included the video about that. Now we saw the move on those up 65%. And the $13 calls for May 16th were also up 41% yesterday, with SoFi up another 6 points this morning. The $13 calls right here for May 2nd should open around 44 bucks. So doubled your money there in that regard. Not bad for a $5 subscription and the support on X. And then the $13 call for May 16th. Let's see, that should open around $68 from the entry of 40, about 42. So, yeah, we got you some points on the SoFi deal. So, hopefully, you did pay attention to that. And there were opportunities to reload that after the alert as well. We can see the move on the 13 calls around here where I filled, and up here 28. So those are moving up and they expire on May 2nd. And the 13th for May 16th, same, gave you the opportunity, and here was your payout within a higher one today. But how about that? Let's jump over to GameStop because we saw last night that 3069 thump on Robinhood and on Robinhood and Weeble. So I know everyone got excited about that. It was always that single share, one share, 3069. Kind of made everybody get excited. But let's take a look at that yesterday. We'll take a look at the daily chart. We'll look at some of that option flow and get you going on your day. We made a higher high on GameStop. We talked earlier this week, even during yesterday and Monday's video. And I'd said, I like the stock. I like what's happening. I like what we see here. I like the increased volume yesterday. I like the touch of the 9 EMA on Tuesday. So those were some things, to note within the stock, and kind of closing even more on that earnings gap up from March 26th. So if you take a look over in the left-hand corner of your screen, top left corner, those are some of your moving averages. You've got your 9-day at 26.32, your 21 EMA at 25.33, and your 50-day at 24.74, and your 200-day SMA at 24.90. All of these moving averages have converged, and then I like seeing these 9 and the 21 EMA, a shorter time frame crossing over a longer time frame on a daily. Pretty strong in that regard. GameStop yesterday, like I said, had the higher high, 27.94. So it's currently trading at 28.15 at the time of this video this morning. So hey, I like it. It's up. It's 28. And if you haven't, go back. We've been talking about it since last year, where I talk about gamma and when things start building, more calls go in the money that are already open interest out there, and it creates upside pressure on the stock as more of the calls go in the money. There's more hedging from market makers, and the same implies on the inverse where there's a lot of calls selling, a lot of put buying, market makers hedge. That puts some additional downside pressure on the stock. So with GameStop, we've seen the upside pressure. I'd shared this video, and I'll go ahead and share it again here if you want to learn more about gamma exposure and how it applies to GameStop. I'm going to go ahead and repost this right now while I'm recording this so it's fresh. But just highly recommend everybody check it out. It's a 5-minute video. Just gives you some concrete knowledge and data on the gamma and how it actually applied to GameStop there. So let's see here. Pull it up real quick. I think it's just important to see, and then you can see kind of that playing out, and we'll talk about that as well. So like I said, we're filling that gap. I like it. If you look to where we were last year, the stock was $12. I mean, going back to the weekly chart, that's solid. breaking right out above your 200 MA on the weekly. So something to watch, some of your weekly levels there. Go ahead and look on your left hand corner. 2637 is the 200 SMA on the weekly. 2576, 2573 are your 9 and 21. So you see those are also converging on the weekly as well. It's pretty good strength there within the stock, even on less lower volumes. So if we look at that 4 hour, we're kind of trending up. So we're trending right above that 200 SMA. So that would be your point at 2685. Anything above that, if it fall below, look for your moving averages and obviously previous lows for the stock in regards to the support there. But yeah, I mean, here was earnings, and yeah, you're filling that up, getting up there closer. I'd like to see it up closer to the body, higher 28s, 29. But if the stock moves up anymore, like I said, we talked about that gamma that exists at 26, 27, and now you're seeing it at 28. So if we look at that flow yesterday, it was kind of off to the races. It was kind of slower in the morning. GameStop moved up to see near 27 and some change, 27.94, and then net call premium actually finished out for the day at 3.5 mil. So seems exciting. We'll take a look at that because the total premium on the day, let's see, daily premium 26 mils, so kind of light in that regard, but the net call premium was up. So if we look at like where the largest impact was made from that net premium, seeing more of those $10 calls for January, like we talked about in the reasoning, $27 calls for this week, 26 for this week, and 25. So your largest impact to the option chain were mostly short dated calls that are all in the money, and we did see these 30s for May and June as well starting to appear. So we'll take a look at some of those as well. The premium by expiry, let's see, the largest was for this week, and then starting to build out a little bit more into May, and then there was some more for January, and that's from those $10 calls. So if we take a look here, we'll go ahead and take a look at the top options there for the day on the volume. But yeah, net premium at 3.6 with the net call premium at 3.54. So positive day in that regard. Volatility still kind of hanging loose there. So you can see the 26 mil total premium kind of lighter in that regard, but a nice jump there in the net premium. Always good to see. Yesterday a little bit higher on the volume than we saw the day before with some contracts. So your highest volume contracts, all which is usually what the case is, centered around short dated contracts. The 30 calls for this week, the 28s, 27, 29, the 28, 27 are all in the money. 29 is just kind of out of the money. 30 for May 2nd and the 30 for this week. So those were like your highest volume. But you kind of note, we've talked about this before, 48 green. So kind of mix between buyers and sellers. The 27s, I did see a little bit of activity yesterday, a little bit more on the ask side, so a little bit more buying. Let's see, we did have some volume near 10,000 and about 1 million in premium. Open interest did not increase, but there were buyers there. So like I said, contracts could change hands in that regard, but those calls are in the money. Did see a low of around $73 up to about 120. So not too bad of an intraday move on a short dated contract. Let's look at the 30s for this week as well. Again, a lot of volume yesterday, 19,000, about 330K in premium, but it was split between buyers and sellers, not really directional per se. Both sides of the thesis, long and short. Didn't see really much change in the open interest. The 30s are about 6% out of the money. Stock's trading at $28.20. So somebody could be, selling volatility on the idea they don't think GameStop will close above 30, so they want to capture some premium. And we've talked about this throughout the videos. Let's take a look here. The 28s as well this week. Short dated, so always be very careful with there. IV was low yesterday at 68%. About 816,000 total premium. A little bit more buying than selling, and you do see a little bit of increase in the open interest this morning. About 8,200 volume yesterday, and open interest increased about 30% on that. The 28 calls would be in the money at this price currently, as the stock's 28.16 at time of filming, 28.20. So these are in the money. Let's see, they did have a low of 40 and popped up to 65, so a nice 50 point move or 50% move. on short dated. I know, exciting. A lot of people were excited yesterday about GameStop. Saw some people making money on just some, short dated opportunities, and you can't, you got to do it. If that's what you want, you got to do it. So 260,000 premium on the 29 calls, which are out of the money as well. About a third of the volume from yesterday did carry over to new open interests, kind of split between buyers and sellers. Not really directional per se. Whereas those that are bullish for the stock were buying $29 calls. There might have been those that weren't necessarily bearish on the stock. They just didn't feel it would close above 29. It might have been collecting some premium. So, like I said, a lot of the volume and the premium for yesterday was for all short dated. So we'll take a look at these 30s as well for May 2nd. About 8,300 volume yesterday. A little bit of increase in open interest, 1,700. So of the nearly 500,000 in premium yesterday, you did see about 20, 16, 20% of that appear in new open interest. A little bit more buying than selling on the ask side. So these would be the $30 calls for May 2nd. Some traders may feel the stock continues advancing and they are going to make some money. Let's see, those calls were filling at $40 on the 21st. Ran up to 60, so yeah, 50-point move there. Still a semi-short dated contract. So I'll give you a chance to take a look at the other volume here. And you can see how it was kind of comprised there, kind of split between buyers and sellers. The 26s did see activity as well yesterday, so we'll take a look at those because that was kind of more in the money there. There was 4,000 volume yesterday and 673,000 total premium. Not bad, but you can see open interest decrease. So more than likely, some of these contracts changed hands. Somebody might have been selling covered calls here and needed to buy them back as they started to run away from them. Some people might have been buying here and selling just to make a profit. But like I said, if you were, maybe selling covered calls here, maybe you had a bearish sentiment on the stock at 106, maybe you sold some more. Then the contract's bopped to 200, you probably close the position because you got rugged. Or you didn't want your shares assigned because the calls then went in the money. So a lot of different scenarios that could happen in that regard. But did see some of that activity yesterday as well. So if we look at the bulk of where that cash was actually spent yesterday, we'll take a look at that on GameStop. And we'll take a look at all of our open interest updates this morning. So we always sort it by the highest premium here. Let's take a look real quick here. GameStop. All right, highest premium is on the 30s for June 20th. See 3,100 volume yesterday, almost a mil in premium, only 31 in new open interest. So these contracts could have changed hands. Buyers repositioning, closing. So over the last 7 days, it's kind of split between the bid and the ask volume. So combination of buyers and sellers. Some feel the stock will continue advancing. It could be an earnings related play, maybe a Bitcoin news announcement play in that regard. So it's the June expiry, but definitely seeing some activity. In the 27s, calls for this week was also one of the highest. So I try to look for things above 500K in premium. Doesn't mean the ones that are less aren't significant. The largest drivers I tend to find for the stock, 500,000 premium and higher. So I'll let you take a look at that here. You can see some of the other ones, the 30s for July. So again, we're seeing some of that May, June, and July kind of being built out at that $30 level. And we'll talk about that. So even though there's 1,500 volume, half a mil in premium yesterday, the open interest decreased. So let's see here. More than likely, somebody could be closing a position as the stock moved up to capture some gains. Either which way. Could have sold a bunch of them and then had to buy them back. A lot of different ways. Not a lot, but a few different ways that could actually play out in that regard. In the 30s for May 16th, I know we talked about those as well. Been seeing activity over the last 7 days, kind of been down there. And they did pop back up yesterday with the price action, but only about 10% of that volume, which was near 7,000 yesterday, only about 600 appeared new open interest. So it doesn't mean it's down and out. It just means, like I said, contracts changing hands, buyers to sellers, sellers to buyers. But there's definitely a bullish sentiment within the stock, based on the option chain and what's being traded thus far. So I'll let you, take a screenshot there so you can see here was your highest premium spent, the volume of those, what the actual strike and expiry was. But let's jump back over to our net flow because we're going to pull up that gamma and just do a little quick refresher on the gamma as we discussed that in that separate video, but that way how it applies and kind of how you can see it playing out here in that regard. So for those that need that quick refresher, we talked about the spot gamma on spot gamma exposure is the assumed dollar value of gamma exposure that market makers need to hedge per 1% change of the underlying stock's price movement, a positive value long gamma, a negative value short gamma. So it's assumed market makers are selling calls, buying puts to investors and those that are hedging, and they have to hedge as well. So per 1% price and change, about $24 million to contain that, about 3 million shares to the long side. So what happens is, as more of these calls, before we were even at 26, when we were here down at 25 and some change, I said as GameStop moves up, more of those calls go in the money. It increases the gamma pressure, which can doesn't always, but can create gamma pressure on the stock for the upside, which you saw because now the 27s, 28s are in the money. Now the 28.50, 29 and 30 just lingering out there. If the stock continues advancing, more of those calls go into the money, and that creates additional upside pressure on the stock. Conversely, if you see a lot of calls selling and a lot of put buying, that can create negative pressure on the stock as these calls would essentially move further out of the money. So the market maker can reduce their exposure, which would involve them selling shares against there, and you would see the downside pressure on the stock. It sounds cut and dry, but that's kind of exactly how it goes down. So if you're a market maker, your objective as a market maker is not necessarily profit, is to just finish with a flat book at the end of the day. That way you're not overexposed or underexposed as you're making your money all day doing the trades themselves. You're profiting off the bid, the spread. You're profiting off of payment for order flow. So ideally, a market maker just wants to end their book neutral in that regard. They don't want to be up. They don't want to be down per se. It's just how they do it. They're a market maker. They're the ones facilitating the liquidity to the options. So we can see that gamma, before back in March, and now here we go. And there you go. As price moved up, it gets a little more spicy. I talked about it last year. I've talked about it almost every week since last year. As GameStop advances towards more of those calls are in the money, this thing gets volatile. It gets spicy. More people jump on buying stock, more people jump in buying calls, and it really leverages the stock. You saw it last year. Even without Roaring Kitty, there was plenty of movement and has been in the stock, since Kitty's last post. So we've seen the moves, whether he's there or not, whether he posts, whether he's buying, doesn't matter. There's still moves happening within the stock. So if you look at that highest net gamma at 30, like we've talked about, and it was at 26 and 27, and now the stock trading at 28, it really puts more of that pressure in. So as more call buying continues, it really puts a lot of pressure. So, and it's all pretty much to the upside. I'm not saying the downside doesn't exist, but most of the gamma is centered around, net gamma is centered around to the upside. Call Gex at 3.7 million shares in that regard. So if you look at the delta as well, again, delta is what drives, your price there on your contract, your change in price. So if you look here, the 25's strong, the 20's been strong, but now you're seeing more up here. Net delta up here at 32, 33, 34, and 35. That's because of all the 32, 33, 31, and $35 calls for May out there, but net delta is pretty strong. So again, GameStop continues advancing, brings more of those calls into the money. It gets a little spicy, and you know this. You've seen it. So be prepared for it. Manage your risk. Manage your expectations, and be ready to capitalize on these opportunities. That's why I love making these videos, to highlight the opportunity, because I receive a ton of DMs throughout the week from people that are like, hey, love the videos. I follow this, love the education. I'm learning a lot. And then they'll share screenshots. Hey, I made a good trade, and I love seeing that. But yeah, your net delta here, strong for this week expiry and built all the way now into May and June, July, and now January. So like I said, stocks continues advancing. If they come out on earnings report and say they bought Bitcoin at 76K, Bitcoin's back over 90, that's good. They can realize the value of that increase on accounting. So yeah, there's a lot of different things going on with GameStop besides just the options chain and the stock and the chart, So yeah, it's like I said, these are your levels to watch, because this video is going to end right as the market's getting ready to open. So be mindful of those EMA and like I said, your moving averages on the daily. I like to show those kind of tightening up the gap. If the stock moves back down, just look for previous levels or moving averages as support. What goes up can come down, and what goes down can go up. But if you watch the video all the way through, you are very awesome for that. And I do always appreciate the support, and I hope that it is helping those as well. So we'll look at those OI changes here. Oh, pardon me there. Pull up GameStop real quick here. Give me GameStop. And go back to overview here, and then I want to look at it through this way. Dun, 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 dun. For today's date, April 23rd, I want to see the highest updated ones for GameStop. So that way you guys got it on your data here. We'll let that refresh real quick. All right. Yeah, your highest gains to open interest were all on, like I said, the short data. The 28th from May 16th did increase, but there's your increases there to open interest. Not a lot of big changes. Let's look at the decreases here, because I can sort it both ways using unusual whales. A little bit of changes there. Some of the 26s came out. I assume somebody ran for the hills on those $25 puts they tried to sell. I mean, that works. They made their money, so who cares? You sold them, and they went down, and bought them back, make your money. I encourage that. So, but yes, happy trading to you if you watched it all the way through. Just comment down below, Nintendo Switch 2 pre-order. And I'll know you watched today's video all the way through. I'm getting a glimpse of the open at the tail end of the video, 28.18. So gapping up a little bit there. And getting closer to the body of that gap up. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. Happy Wednesday to you. And I'll see you around the internet real soon. Have a great day, everybody.